Imagine standing in the middle of a desert where the wind feels ancient, the sand holds secrets older than memory, and in front of you rise the enormous pyramids of Egypt, structures so perfect, so mathematically precise, that even today scientists struggle to explain how they were built. Now imagine that every stone, every carving, every tomb hidden beneath the sand is trying to tell you a story of kings and queens, gods and rituals, genius engineering, and a civilization that shaped the world in ways we're still discovering. If you've ever wondered who the pharaohs really were, why the pyramids were built, or what made ancient Egypt so powerful for thousands of years, today you're about to travel farther back in time than you ever have before. So sit tight, because this is the full history of ancient Egypt, explained simply, clearly, and with all the secrets you never heard in school. When we talk about the story of ancient Egypt, it's impossible to understand its greatness without going back to the moment it truly began, the moment when Upper and Lower Egypt were united under a single powerful ruler. Before this unification, Egypt wasn't the mighty civilization we imagine today. It was a collection of separate regions, small kingdoms, and scattered communities living along the Nile. These communities had their own customs, leaders, and ways of life. The land was divided naturally by the Nile River, with the northern region known as Lower Egypt and the southern region known as Upper Egypt. Even though the names sound opposite, Egyptians identified direction based on the flow of the Nile, which moves from south to north. This geographic distinction wasn't just physical, it shaped culture, politics, and identity. For centuries, these regions operated independently, sometimes peacefully, sometimes with conflict. But everything changed around 3100 BCE when a figure emerged who would alter the course of human civilization forever. Narmer, also known by some as Menes. He was not just another local ruler, he was a visionary leader who saw beyond division. He believed these two lands should not compete or remain divided. He believed they should be united into one powerful kingdom. According to ancient records, Narmer led a successful campaign to bring both Upper and Lower Egypt under his authority. Whether it happened through war, strategic alliances, or a combination of both, the outcome was revolutionary. The unification created a strong centralized state with one government, one ruler, one system of writing, and one shared identity. Imagine the impact of this. Instead of two separate regions fighting for control of resources, trade routes, and land, Egypt became a single organized nation with structure, stability, and purpose. This stability was rare in the ancient world. Many early civilizations fell quickly because of endless conflict, unpredictable weather, unstable farming conditions, and weak leadership. But Egypt, with the powerful Nile at its core and strong centralized rule, created something far more enduring. Once unified, Egypt had a foundation that allowed it to grow rapidly. Narmer established the first dynasty, marking the beginning of what historians call the early dynastic period. This was the birth of the concept of the pharaoh, not just as a ruler, but as a divine figure chosen by the gods. This idea became the backbone of Egyptian society. People believed the pharaoh kept order in the world, both physically and spiritually. With unity came organization. Egypt developed one of the earliest and most sophisticated writing systems, hieroglyphics. This wasn't just decoration carved on temple walls. It was a functional language used for administration, record keeping, communication, religion, and storytelling. Writing allowed Egypt to manage large populations, collect taxes, record harvests, track trade, and preserve history in a way other civilizations couldn't at the time. The unification also allowed for large-scale projects that would have been impossible for smaller kingdoms. Irrigation systems along the Nile became more organized, making farming more efficient. Agriculture improved, food supply grew, and the population expanded. With more people, more resources, and more stability, Egypt could invest in innovation, architecture, science, and culture. The unification didn't just change politics, it shaped identity. Egyptians began seeing themselves as part of something greater than their local town or region. They saw themselves as part of the two lands, united under one crown. The double crown, combining the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt, became a symbol of this unity. Every pharaoh wore this crown as a reminder that the kingdom was strongest when both regions stood together. This sense of unity and shared purpose allowed Egypt to develop a civilization that would last for more than 3,000 years, a feat no other ancient society achieved. Think about that. Dynasties rose and fell, temples were built and rebuilt, cities came to life and were swallowed by sand, but the identity and structure of Egypt remained strong for millennia. It all traces back to that moment of unification. Without Nama's achievement, there would be no pyramids, no pharaohs, no golden age of Egyptian culture, no lasting legacy that fascinates the world today. The organization of the government also began to take shape at this time. Officials were appointed to manage different parts of society: farming, transportation, trade, taxation, religious rituals, and more. This level of administrative structure was far ahead of many other early civilizations. It allowed Egypt to function as a single, well-managed system rather than a chaotic collection of independent settlements. The economy flourished because goods could move freely along the Nile without conflict between regions. Trade expanded not only within Egypt, but also beyond its borders into neighboring lands. Egyptians traded grain, linen, gold, pottery, and papyrus for items like cedar wood from Lebanon, incense from Punt, and copper from Sinai. This expanding trade network helped Egypt grow richer and more influential. Social structure also began forming in a clear hierarchy. The pharaoh stood at the top, followed by nobles, priests, scribes, craftsmen, farmers, and laborers. Each group had a role that contributed to the stability of the kingdom. The unity of the two lands created a shared economic system, a shared religious system, and a shared cultural identity. It made Egyptians feel connected through common beliefs, stories, and practices. Their religion developed rapidly during this time, with gods representing natural forces like the sun, sky, Nile, and earth. These gods played a huge role in Egyptian life, influencing everything from farming to politics. Temples began to be built, ceremonies became organized, and priests gained importance as spiritual guides and record keepers. This combination of religion, government, agriculture, and culture working together in harmony was unique. It gave Egypt a strong foundation that other civilizations admired and sometimes feared. The unification also set the stage for the architectural wonders that came later. Large-scale construction required not only manpower, but also centralized planning, laws, and skilled workers. Without a unified Egypt, the pyramids would have been impossible. The engineering knowledge, resource control, organized labor force, and powerful leadership needed to build such structures all began with Nama's decision to bring the lands together. In many ways, Egypt's greatness wasn't an accident. It was the direct result of structure, unity, leadership, and stability. The natural environment of the Nile supported this, but it was the unification that allowed Egyptians to take full advantage of their resources. The joining of Upper and Lower Egypt didn't just create a country, it created a legacy that would inspire countless generations. It allowed a civilization to rise that would influence art, science, medicine, architecture, literature, and spirituality for thousands of years. Even today, when people talk about ancient history, Egypt stands at the top because of its long life, its achievements, and its mysteries. All of it began with that first moment of unity. When we think about ancient Egypt, the first images that come to mind are almost always the pyramids, standing tall against the desert sky. silent and powerful symbols of a civilization that mastered engineering long before the modern world existed. The Great Pyramid of Giza, in particular, has become a global icon, not just because of its size, but because of the unbelievable precision and planning that went into its construction. These massive structures weren't just tombs, they were statements of power, devotion, mathematics, and human determination. To understand how they were built, we have to look beyond the myths and appreciate the extraordinary level of organization that ancient Egypt possessed during the Old Kingdom. Hollywood often paints a picture of slaves suffering under the burning sun, but archaeology tells a different story. The workers who built the pyramids were not slaves at all. They were skilled laborers, craftspeople, engineers, stonecutters, and farmers who came to work during the flood season when their fields were underwater and farming wasn't possible. They were part of a rotating labor force that lived in carefully planned workers' villages near the construction sites, with bakeries, breweries, medical centers, and sleeping quarters. They were paid in food, beer, clothing, and housing, and their remains show signs of medical treatment, healed injuries, and diets far better than the average population. This immediately changes the image we often imagine. Instead of chains and punishment, picture well-organized teams of workers using coordinated systems, mathematical measurements, and surprisingly advanced tools to move millions of stone blocks with purpose and pride. The scale of pyramid construction is almost impossible to comprehend. The Great Pyramid alone contains over 2 million limestone blocks, each weighing between 2 and 15 tons, and some granite blocks used inside weigh more than 70 tons. These stones weren't just randomly stacked. Every block was cut with exact measurements, transported across miles of desert, aligned with astronomical precision, and placed in a way that allowed the pyramid to remain stable for more than 500 years. Even today, with satellites, computer modeling, and advanced instruments, engineers still debate how the Egyptians achieved such perfection. Many modern structures don't last more than a few decades without major repairs. Yet these pyramids have survived thousands of years of storms, earthquakes, erosion, and human activity. To understand this accomplishment, imagine the planning involved. Before construction even began, architects and priests studied the stars, especially the North Star and Orion's belt, to align the pyramid almost perfectly with the cardinal directions. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy of 0.067 degrees, a level of precision that even modern builders struggle to achieve without advanced equipment. Then imagine the logistics. Workers had to quarry massive stones using copper tools, wooden sleds, and simple but brilliant techniques. They likely used lubricated paths, water, or wet sand to reduce friction while pulling the sleds. Teams coordinated their efforts using rhythmic chanting, drums, or signals to pull in unison, which made the movement of heavy stones easier. Ramps, whether straight, zigzag, or circular, helped lift stones to higher levels. The debate about ramp designs continues even today, which shows how advanced Egyptian engineering truly was. But raw muscle wasn't the only factor. The Egyptians had an incredible understanding of math and geometry. They used ratios, right angles, and precise measurements to ensure each layer matched the one below it. They understood how to distribute weight, how to create internal chambers that wouldn't collapse, and how to angle the sides to maximize stability. Their ability to think on a massive architectural scale was unmatched. Every stone had a number, a place, a purpose. Every worker had a task, a supervisor, and a schedule. This level of project management is something modern companies study today. It demonstrates the organizational strength of Egypt during the Old Kingdom, a strength made possible only because the country was unified and stable. The workers themselves left behind evidence that tells us their story. In the workers' villages, Archaeologists found graffiti carved into stone that included team names like the Friends of Khufu or the Drunkards of Menkora, showing pride and humor. They found bakeries capable of producing hundreds of loaves a day, breweries making gallons of beer, large kitchens roasting meat, and medical facilities with evidence of surgeries and bone setting. Workers who were injured on the job received treatment and continued working after healing. This was not forced labor. This was a national workforce participating in a project of divine and political significance. Building the pyramid wasn't just a job, it was a religious duty. Egyptians believed that by helping the pharaoh reach the afterlife, they were ensuring the continued stability of the kingdom and the blessings of the gods for everyone. The purpose of the pyramids also explains the dedication behind their construction. Egyptians believed the pharaoh was a god on earth, and after death he became one with the gods. The pyramids served as a gateway to eternity. The internal chambers, the air shafts aligned with specific stars, the carefully sealed doors, and the treasures placed inside were all part of a spiritual journey. Workers didn't see themselves as building a monument for a man. They saw themselves as building a spiritual machine designed to help their divine ruler ascend to the heavens. This belief gave them motivation far beyond what money or force could ever provide. And the pyramids weren't built in isolation. They were part of a massive complex that included temples, courtyards, causeways, boat pits, and nearby cemeteries filled with nobles, workers, and officials. Entire cities emerged around these construction sites, filled with life, culture, and community. These cities were temporary, but their scale shows how many people participated in the pyramid project, tens of thousands at its peak. It wasn't a small effort. It was a national movement that involved farmers, architects, priests, craftsmen, engineers, laborers, and administrators, all working toward a single unified goal. Even today, scientists use modern tools to scan the pyramids, and they still find hidden chambers and unknown spaces. The mystery is still alive. How were the stones placed so perfectly? How did they achieve such symmetry? How did they organize labor so efficiently? How did they develop the math and astronomy needed to align these structures so precisely? Every new discovery deepens the respect we have for Egyptian builders. And each answer reveals that the Egyptians were not primitive or lucky. They were intentional, disciplined, intelligent, and inspired by a belief system that united millions of people over generations. That's what allowed them to create structures that continue to stand as one of humanity's greatest achievements. When we talk about ancient Egypt, one of the most fascinating parts of its entire civilization is the role of the pharaoh. The pharaoh wasn't just the king or ruler of the land. He was believed to be a living god on earth, a direct connection between the human world and the divine. This belief shaped every part of Egyptian life. It influenced politics, religion, culture, architecture, law, farming, war, medicine, art, and even the way people understood life and death. To fully grasp why Egypt became so powerful and so stable for thousands of years, you have to understand how the Egyptians viewed their pharaohs and why their society depended so deeply on this belief system. Imagine waking up in ancient times, seeing the sun rise over the horizon, and believing with your whole heart that the sun travels across the sky because your pharaoh has a sacred responsibility to keep the world in balance. The Egyptians believed in a concept called Ma'at, which represented harmony, order, truth, balance, and justice. Everything in life depended on Ma'at. Floods had to come at the right time, crops had to grow, the Nile had to remain stable, enemies had to be kept away, and the spiritual world had to stay in harmony with the physical world. If anything went wrong, people didn't blame nature or chance. They believed it meant Ma'at had been disturbed, and the one person responsible for maintaining Ma'at was the pharaoh. This belief created a deep sense of trust and obedience among the people. The pharaoh wasn't simply giving orders because he wanted power. In their eyes, he was chosen by the gods to rule. His leadership was a cosmic duty. He was the human embodiment of Horus, the sky god, and upon death he became Osiris, the god of the afterlife. This made leadership sacred. If the pharaoh succeeded, Egypt thrived. If the pharaoh failed spiritually, the entire kingdom suffered. This belief system gave Egyptian society exceptional stability. Unlike other ancient civilizations where leadership changed constantly because of rebellions or rivalries, Egypt remained unified for long periods because the pharaoh's divine status discouraged people from challenging him. They didn't see him as just a political leader, but as a sacred protector. This strong central authority allowed the nation to plan massive projects, mobilize workers, manage resources, and maintain peace over huge areas of land. The pharaoh's influence reached every corner of daily life. Farmers believed the pharaoh helped ensure the Nile flooded correctly, which was essential for agriculture. Priests believed he communicated with the gods, offering rituals that kept the temples spiritually charged. Soldiers believed he led armies blessed by divine power, and that fighting for him meant fighting for Egypt itself. Administrators, scribes, and workers believed they were part of a cosmic system, where doing their job meant helping maintain the balance of the world. One of the most powerful ways the pharaoh expressed his role was through monumental architecture. Temples, statues, pyramids, obelisks, and colossal gateways weren't built just to impress people. They were built because the pharaoh needed to honor the gods, demonstrate his divine authority, and preserve his own legacy for eternity. Every carving, every inscription, every statue stood as a reminder that the king was the bridge between heaven and earth. The pyramids, in particular, symbolized this relationship. A pyramid wasn't just a tomb. It was a spiritual engine designed to transform the pharaoh from a human being into a divine presence among the gods. The idea was that if he reached the afterlife successfully, he would continue protecting Egypt from the divine realm. So building these monuments wasn't just a political gesture, it was a national spiritual mission. Egyptians believed that dedicating their time and labor to the pharaoh's tomb directly contributed to the prosperity and survival of the country. Even in foreign policy, the pharaoh's divine identity played a role. When Egypt expanded its borders or defended itself against invaders, victories were seen as proof of the pharaoh's spiritual strength. Defeats were seen as signs of spiritual imbalance. This made military leadership not just a matter of strategy, but a matter of cosmic significance. Soldiers didn't fight only for land or wealth, they fought to uphold the order of the world. This belief made Egypt's armies incredibly dedicated and loyal. The pharaoh's divine status also shaped the economy. Since he was seen as the earthly representative of the gods, all land technically belonged to him. Farmers paid taxes not just because the government demanded it, but because they believed a portion of their harvest was an offering to maintain cosmic balance. Craftsmen created exquisite jewelry, pottery, statues, and tools to honor the pharaoh and the gods. Large temple estates grew crops, raised animals, and managed trade in the pharaoh's name. Every part of society functioned like the organs of a single body, with the pharaoh as the heart keeping everything alive. Religion and politics were intertwined so deeply that you couldn't separate them. Temples weren't just places of worship. They were centers of economic activity, education, culture, and astronomy. Priests carried out rituals on behalf of the pharaoh, offering prayers, incense, food, and symbolic gestures to keep the gods satisfied. These rituals were believed to protect the land from famine, disease, and chaos. If the pharaoh failed to uphold these duties, Egyptians feared the world would fall into disorder. This fear made spiritual obedience deeply ingrained in their culture. Even the pharaoh's appearance reinforced his divine status. The crowns, the ceremonial beard, the cobra symbol Urius, the kilt, the scepter, all were symbols of power and divine approval. The double crown, combining the red crown of Lower Egypt and the white crown of Upper Egypt, reminded the nation that the pharaoh ruled the two lands as one unified country. His image carved on temples always showed him strong, youthful, powerful, and larger than life, because his role wasn't to appear human, it was to appear eternal. Despite all this power, the pharaoh wasn't isolated. He relied on advisors, priests, generals, and skilled workers to carry out the duties of the state. But even these powerful officials believed they served under a divine force. Their loyalty wasn't only political, it was spiritual. When they followed the pharaoh's orders, they believed they were following the will of the gods. The concept of the pharaoh as a divine ruler also shaped how Egyptians saw life after death. Ordinary people believed they could achieve eternal life, but the pharaoh set the example. His journey to the afterlife was the model that everyone else followed. The rituals performed during his burial were perfected over centuries, becoming the foundation for Egyptian funerary traditions. Mummification, tomb construction, hieroglyphic spells, protective amulets, and funerary ceremonies all began with the pharaoh and then spread to the rest of society. The belief that the pharaoh became a divine protector after death gave people comfort and reassurance. It made the afterlife seem real and attainable. In the end, the pharaoh's role as a living god wasn't just a religious idea. It was the central force that held Egypt together. It created unity, discipline, devotion, and purpose. It allowed Egyptians to organize themselves into a civilization, unlike anything the world had seen before. The pharaoh represented stability, hope, spiritual protection, and the promise that the world would continue running in harmony as long as he fulfilled his sacred duty. When we enter the era known as the New Kingdom of Ancient Egypt, we step into a period that feels larger than life, filled with iconic pharaohs, bold reforms, global influence, and some of the greatest achievements Egypt ever produced. This was the time when Egypt reached the peak of its power, when its borders stretched farther than ever before. Its wealth overflowed, and its rulers became legends whose names still echo thousands of years later. And to understand why this period stands out so dramatically, we have to look closely at the rulers who shaped it, because the story of the New Kingdom is really the story of pharaohs who dared to reshape their world in ways no one before them had attempted. It begins with the 18th dynasty, rising from the ashes after Egypt expelled the Hyksos invaders, a painful chapter that taught the Egyptians the importance of military strength, unity, and a strong central government. From this rebuilding emerged some of the most unforgettable rulers in history, each contributing something unique to the identity of Egypt. One of the first standout figures is Hatshepsut, a queen who refused to be limited by tradition and transformed herself into a king. Her journey is one of the most fascinating chapters in Egyptian history, because she stepped into a role that was never meant for her according to the old rules. Yet she proved that leadership was not based on gender, but on vision, intelligence, and determination. She wore the traditional false beard, dressed in royal male attire, and was depicted in statues as a strong king, not because she wanted to pretend to be someone else, but because she wanted Egypt to accept her authority without question. Under her rule, Egypt didn't just survive, it thrived. Instead of focusing purely on war, she invested in peace, trade, and building projects that elevated Egypt's status and wealth. One of her greatest achievements was the expedition to the land of Punt, a mysterious trading partner that supplied gold, incense, exotic animals, and rare plants. This mission filled Egypt with prosperity and strengthened its international relationships. Her massive temple at Deir el-Bahari remains one of the architectural masterpieces of the ancient world and a symbol of her successful rule. Even though later pharaohs tried to erase her name from history, her legacy proved stronger than their attempts to silence it. After Hatshepsut came a very different kind of ruler, Akhenaten, the pharaoh who shocked Egypt by turning its entire religious system upside down. While Egypt traditionally worshipped a vast pantheon of gods, Akhenaten introduced something radically different: the worship of a single deity, the Aten, symbolized by the sun disk. This was more than a religious shift, it was a cultural revolution. He shut down temples, moved the capital to a brand new city he built from scratch, and instructed artists to adopt a new style that was more realistic and emotional, breaking from centuries of tradition. His intentions are still debated. Was he a visionary, a reformer, or a ruler who destabilized Egypt with his extreme ideas? Whatever the truth, his reign left a powerful imprint. His queen, Nefertiti, became one of the most iconic figures in art and history. Her beauty and elegance captured in the world-famous bust that survives today. Akhenaten's reign was a dramatic experiment that didn't last long after his death. But it showed how drastically Egypt could be reshaped under a ruler who believed deeply in his own vision. Then there is Tutankhamun, perhaps the most famous pharaoh of all. Even though he ruled for a short time and accomplished little politically compared to others. What makes him legendary is not so much what he did while alive, but what happened after his death. His tomb, discovered almost completely intact in 1922, offered the world an extraordinary look into ancient Egyptian life, beliefs, and burial customs. Before that discovery, many details about pharaohs were guesses or myths. But Tutankhamun's treasures provided concrete evidence of how royals lived, what they valued, and how elaborate their funerary practices were. Even though he became king at a very young age and ruled for only about 9 years, his decision to restore traditional religion after Akhenaten's reforms played an important role in stabilizing Egypt during a confused time. But if there is one ruler who truly defines the power and grandeur of the New Kingdom, it is Ramses II, later known as Ramses the Great. His reign lasted an incredible 66 years, long enough for him to build more monuments, temples, and statues than nearly any other pharaoh. He was a leader who understood both war and diplomacy, and he wasn't afraid to display his achievements boldly. The Battle of Kadesh, fought against the Hittites, became one of the most famous military clashes in the ancient world, and although the battle ended in a stalemate, Ramses II's inscriptions turned it into a legendary Egyptian victory. What made him truly remarkable was not only his skill in battle, but also his understanding of peace. He signed the world's first known peace treaty, a document so advanced for its time that a copy hangs in the United Nations building today as a symbol of early diplomacy. He built the massive temples of Abu Simbel, carved directly into a mountain, designed so that twice a year the sun would illuminate the inner statues, a breathtaking combination of art, architecture, and astronomy. His contributions shaped Egypt's identity, ensuring that it remained a superpower of the ancient world. Other rulers during the New Kingdom continued to strengthen Egypt's military, expand its borders, and fortify its economy. Egypt became a global influencer, trading with distant lands and engaging in international politics with other major empires like the Hittites, Assyrians, Nubians, and Mycenaean Greeks. The wealth flowing into Egypt funded monuments, temples, and cities that still amaze modern architects. Priests, scribes, soldiers, and artists all enjoyed the benefits of a thriving society. Literature, science, and medicine advanced, supported by the stability and prosperity created under strong leadership. The pharaohs of the New Kingdom didn't simply rule Egypt, they embodied it. They defined its values, shaped its culture, and created the golden age that historians still admire. When we look at the lasting influence of ancient Egypt, it becomes clear that this civilization didn't just leave behind monuments and legends. It shaped the world in ways that continue to affect our daily lives even today. The more we learn about Egypt, the more we realize that so much of what we consider modern, advanced, or scientifically impressive actually had its roots thousands of years ago along the Nile River. And what makes this so fascinating is that the Egyptians weren't simply copying ideas from others. They were innovators, thinkers, observers, and creators who experimented, discovered, and refined knowledge long before many other civilizations even formed. They lived in a world that demanded creativity, a harsh desert environment, a powerful river that could bring life or destruction, and a society that believed deeply in order, balance, and harmony. These conditions pushed them to develop systems that not only helped them survive, but helped them define some of the foundations of global civilization. One of the most powerful ways Egypt shaped the world was through its contributions to medicine. While many ancient societies relied entirely on magic or superstition, the Egyptians created a blend of spiritual belief and practical science that allowed them to diagnose conditions, perform surgeries, and document treatments with surprising accuracy. The surviving medical papyri show detailed notes on broken bones, dental problems, infections, childbirth, and even mental health. They knew how to set fractures, how to treat wounds with honey to prevent infection, and how to create herbal mixtures that acted as early forms of medicine. Their understanding of anatomy came from maintaining bodies during mummification. Even though their goal was spiritual, the knowledge gained from handling organs, muscles, and tissues gave them an advantage in treating the living. Many modern medical terms and techniques have roots in ideas the Egyptians experimented with thousands of years ago. It's incredible to imagine that a civilization so ancient had such advanced knowledge, yet their writings prove it. Their contributions to mathematics were just as significant. The Egyptians weren't studying math for fun. They needed it to control the flooding of the Nile, divide land accurately, calculate taxes, and build enormous structures with perfect alignment. They developed systems for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division long before these became common elsewhere. Their geometry was particularly impressive. To build pyramids, temples, and obelisks, they had to master angles, proportions, and measurements with an almost scientific precision. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, is aligned to the cardinal directions with an accuracy modern engineers still admire. Their ability to survey land after each flood season also required sophisticated tools and methods. Some historians believe that their mathematical principles influenced Greek scholars like Pythagoras, who later built theories based on earlier Egyptian knowledge. Astronomy was another area where Egypt excelled. The night sky was not only a spiritual symbol for them, it was also a practical tool. They observed the stars meticulously, predicting the annual rise of Sirius, which signaled the coming flood of the Nile. This ability allowed them to plan agricultural activities months in advance, ensuring survival and food stability. They created one of the earliest calendars, dividing the year into 12 months of 30 days plus 5 additional days. This system is surprisingly close to the structure of the modern calendar. They also tracked planetary movements, eclipse cycles, and star patterns with a level of detail that influenced later astronomers in the Near East and Mediterranean. The alignment of temples, tombs, and pyramids often followed astronomical markers, proving that their architectural genius was guided by the stars. Speaking of architecture, Egypt's influence in this area is perhaps the most visible and universally recognized. Their ability to build on a massive scale without modern machines continues to astonish architects and engineers today. The pyramids, sphinxes, massive stone temples, towering obelisks, and beautifully decorated tombs set a standard for monumental architecture that inspired cultures across the world. The Greeks, for example, borrowed heavily from Egyptian columns, symmetry, and stone carving techniques. The Romans later adopted and expanded these ideas, spreading Egyptian-influenced architecture throughout Europe. Even today, government buildings, museums, banks, and universities around the world use Egyptian-style columns, shapes, and symbolic designs. The idea that architecture should last, should reflect power, and should be aligned with cosmic principles was deeply Egyptian and is still used in modern city planning. their artistic influence is just as remarkable. Egyptian art focused on clarity, balance, symbolism, and storytelling. Every color, pose, and object in their paintings had meaning. They weren't just creating beauty, they were creating messages, histories, and cultural memories. Their method of combining profile heads with forward-facing bodies created a style so iconic that you can recognize Egyptian art instantly. Many later civilizations copied their techniques for years. Their use of color symbolism influenced religious and cultural art across Africa and the Middle East. Their detailed carvings and hieroglyphs inspired writing systems and visual storytelling traditions in neighboring regions. Even today, graphic designers, fashion brands, movie studios, and video game creators continue to borrow Egyptian aesthetics because they carry a sense of mystery, luxury, and power that never gets old. And then there's their writing system, hieroglyphics, one of the earliest and most sophisticated writing forms ever created. It wasn't just a way to record transactions. It was an entire visual language combining symbols, phonetics, and ideas. The ability to write allowed Egyptians to document medical knowledge, religious beliefs, historical events, and administrative records in a way that preserved their culture for thousands of years. The impact of writing cannot be overstated. It shaped the development of literacy, education, and record, keeping across many civilizations. The discovery of the Rosetta Stone helped scholars finally decode hieroglyphics, unlocking centuries of knowledge that still shape our understanding of language and communication today. Even in the fields of agriculture and engineering, Egypt contributed enormously. They invented irrigation techniques to channel the Nile's waters efficiently, controlled flood cycles, and developed tools and farming strategies that boosted food production. They engineered canals, reservoirs, dikes, and tools that allowed them to farm even in difficult conditions. Their innovations influenced neighboring civilizations and laid the foundation for agricultural systems used across Africa and the Mediterranean. The cultural impact of Egypt also extends into religion and mythology. Their beliefs about the afterlife, judgment, resurrection, gods, and cosmic balance inspired stories and traditions in several cultures. Concepts like the weighing of the heart, moral accountability after death, and the journey of the soul influenced later religious ideas. Even today, films, books, and documentaries draw inspiration from Egyptian myths, making them part of global popular culture. What's truly fascinating is that new discoveries continue to reshape our understanding of Egypt's influence. Archaeologists are still uncovering tombs, artifacts, tools, and writings that reveal more about how Egyptians lived, worked, and thought. Each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, showing that Egypt's impact on the world is far greater than we once imagined. Their knowledge, creativity, and achievements didn't disappear. They traveled through time, shaping Greece, Rome, Africa, the Middle East, and eventually the entire world, proving that ancient Egypt wasn't just another civilization, but one of the most influential cultures in human history.